Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting for November the 18th, 2020. If you would all please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, welcome everyone. We wish that we were in person as we were last month. However, we are doing our best to honor the safer at home order and restrict our meeting gatherings as much as we can. So tonight, the Board of Education is recognizing an outstanding group of Parkway students. We're honoring National Merit Commended and semifinalist students. It has been our Parkway tradition to take time and recognize deserving individuals at our regularly scheduled board meetings. Tonight, we'll be recognizing the students virtually, and the students and their families have been invited to watch the live stream of tonight's meeting. This time, I would like to invite Dr. Chelsea Watson, Deputy Superintendent, to begin the recognition of our National Merit students.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. President Todd, Dr. Sorrentino, members of the board, Dr. Marty, Mrs. Stover, and all of our esteemed guests who are watching this evening. It gives me great pleasure to share with you this evening as we recognize 43 Parkway students. 43 Parkway students have been recognized by the National Merit Scholarship Corporation, an independent non-for-profit organization that conducts competitions for recognition and college undergraduate scholarships through two programs, the National Merit Scholarship Program and the National Achievement Scholarship Program. The National Merit Scholarship Program is an annual academic competition which identifies seniors who represent the top of their graduating class. Commended students place among the top 5% of more than 1.5 million students who entered the competition by taking the preliminary SAT National Merit Scholarship qualifying test. More than 1.6 million juniors in over 22,000 high schools entered the National Merit Program by taking the SAT National Merit Scholarship qualifying test, which serves as an initial screener. About 16,000 students, representing less than 1% of U.S. high school seniors, qualified as National Merit semifinalists, and 90% will go on to become finalists. 26 Parkway students earned National Merit semifinalist status, and an additional 17 students are recognized as commended. National Merit semifinalists have an opportunity to qualify for nearly 7,600 Merit Scholarship Awards worth more than $30 million, which will be offered next spring. This evening, we will recognize students from Central High School, North High, South High, and West High. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tim McCarthy, principal of Central High School, who will recognize his students.
Good evening, and let me begin by just thanking the board for continuing this wonderful tradition on behalf of my colleagues. We always appreciate the Board of Education taking time to recognize the achievements of our students, and this is certainly a special evening, as it is every year, as we recognize these wonderfully gifted and academically successful students. So if I may begin with Central High's commended students. First, Anna Finn, Kevin Gu, Joshua Hyman, Kylie Jost, Spencer Kessler. We're also proud to have 7 National Merit semifinalists: Nicole B., Emily He, Hannah Lee, Charles Rosenzweig, Peter Schaefer, Jack Williams, and Andrew Zhang. It's now my pleasure to turn things over to Dr. Tori Kane from North High School.
Dr. McCarthy, actually, Dr. Kane is having a little technical difficulty. Mr. Rooks and Mrs. Stover, I just sent you a text. So if we can shift to the next person until Dr. Kane is, technology is cooperating with her.
Okay. I believe that would be me. I'm Dr. H from South High, and I am proud to announce our commended and our semifinalists today. And starting off with South High's commended students, by the way, go Patriots, good to see you around school. Daniel Faust, Samantha Musgrave, Jeffrey Walk, and Elise Weddick. Then from South High, for our semifinalists, we have Elizabeth Nolte, Caitlin Ying, Jason Zing. Proud of you and thank you very much, students. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Beth Armato, who is an assistant principal at West High.
Thank you, Dr. H. As Dr. Watson shared, the National Merit Competition is very competitive, and being recognized as a commended student or semifinalist is an incredible honor. Tonight, we are so very proud to recognize the following Longhorns who have earned national merit recognition, starting with the commended students. Ira Ali, Abby Caudle, Adi Patro, Fatima Shahab, Nick Sutherland, Serena Wood, and Justin Shu. Continuing with the semifinalists, Salma Ahmed, Clementine Arneson, Yusuf Hacking, Nick Harms, Shri Jalati, Skylar G, Tyler Kinsey, Katie Montgomery, McKay Morgan, Ava Phillips, Arij Rafiq, Joe Rosenberg, and Kesava Viswanatha. Congratulations.
I don't think Dr. Kane is in. So if we will go back to the North High slide, I will recognize those students. All right, for Parkway North High School, commended student Allison Stanley. Our North High semifinalists, Daniel Grad, Christopher Lau, Aviana C. Congratulations, North High students.
Yep, congratulations indeed. The board and our community are very proud of all of you. So well done. You'll receive certificates in the mail. Thank you also to your family and the staff who have supported you all these years. And thank you for joining us virtually this evening. Parents, you have some outstanding children and should be very proud. Next up, I will read additions, corrections, and modifications to our agenda. 6.01, addendum to agenda item 10.04, approval of personnel items. And 6.02, moved the athletics and activities program evaluation from agenda item 13.01 to 13.02. Next up, we have public comments. Public comment. During public comment time, we provide an opportunity at each meeting for citizen comment in an effort to maintain an open and respectful dialogue with our community. The public comment session is not the appropriate forum for addressing individually identifiable student or personnel matters. Therefore, due to privacy laws protecting students and employees, comments about these matters should not include personal identifiable information about particular students or employees. Members of the public, staff, and students are encouraged to utilize established policies and procedures for offering suggestions or addressing concerns and complaints prior to bringing the issue before the board. Please be mindful that the meetings of the board, including your statements, are broadcast and that you are responsible for any public comments you make. In lieu of a public statement, you may choose to submit your comments to the board in writing. Also, due to time constraints and the need to complete the primary responsibilities of our meeting agenda, we cannot respond during the meeting, so you will receive a response from us in writing. We are always available to have an open dialogue outside of our meetings and can be reached by email or phone using our contact information on the Parkway website. Tonight, we have 18 speakers. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to make their statement. Once your time expires, we will automatically move to the next scheduled speaker. When we're in person, we're able to provide a timer on the screen, but for these virtual meetings, you will need to keep track of your own time. When your time is concluded, your microphone will automatically be muted. At that time, please exit the meeting and rejoin the live stream available to the public. Before we get to our first speaker, I'll just share a couple of things. I think it's worth noting that there's no single piece of data that determines when we are or are not back in school. There's no political group that's behind our decisions. There's no single group of parents that we listen to more than one or the other. We aren't acting out of fear or threats or because there's a certain number of clouds in the sky. We're just a group of volunteers with kids like everyone else, and we all want the best for them, like we assume each of you do too. So I just wanted to share some of those thoughts. We hear a lot from parents, some of whom are speaking tonight, some of whom have just shared an email what they're thinking and feeling these last few months. We know there's a struggle in a lot of different ways, not just with students and parents, but also with staff, and we recognize that. So we're happy to have the folks join us tonight to make their comments. But I just wanted to share some of that. So first up, we have Paige Holtman.
Paige, you can unmute and start your statement.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Paige Holman. I'm a freshman at Parkway South High, and I would like to voice a concern on how everything's being handled with COVID. It seems, okay, what I have here, you're throwing us in a new environment day by day and changing us up with what feels to be little to no preparation. You're doing, and which is affecting the students' mental health in a rather major way. Not to mention that the teachers are giving us homework upon homework assignment, expect us to get this done, which is on the computer, and while we are having an absurd amount of screen time every day going class to class. It's just interesting because you're doing that, and then with that, what's the effect that it's having on students is the mental health rates going to go down, the anxiety rates going to go up, the depression rates going to go up, and students are going to fail more often. And it's also interesting because districts around us are doing the exact same thing we are, or just sticking with a specific topic, and they're doing a whole lot better than us. The fear that it feels like our district has is causing a lot of pain and struggle within the students and within the district in general. It hurts, frankly, because we're trying our best to succeed while, how do I put this? It feels like we're trying our very best to succeed, and we're getting obstacle after obstacle thrown at us.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up is Barb Gross.
President Todd, I did not see Barb Gross in attendance.
Okay, we'll see if she shows up later. Next, we have Stephanie Fortis.
I do not see Stephanie Fortis in attendance.
Okay, next I have Nikki Weinstein.
Nikki is joining us now.
Great. Hi, Nikki, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Parkway is failing at educating my child, and that is something that I, as a proud Parkway alum and someone who intentionally purchased my house in this district, never thought I'd be saying. And I completely understand what a crazy situation we're in, and that the district has an incredibly difficult and daunting task to serve the community at this time. But the district has got to start doing better. We cannot simply wait for the pandemic to be over while our children's education suffers. I've written emails to Dr. Marty and this board and had a phone conversation with Dr. Marty as well, and have yet to see improvement. So I came to the board directly hoping that you'll listen and consider. I'll keep my request simple, twofold, and specifically directed towards elementary education. One is to please teach the full curriculum when using the hybrid scenario. I understand that the community data does not support a full return to school right now. However, this is not an excuse anymore to not fully educate our children. Technology is available to allow new material to be taught every day of the week, while half the students are in the classroom and the other half are at home. And I've got to give a shout out to Mrs. Reeder, the first grade teacher at Piermont, who is nailing this roomy zoomy thing, but she needs support from the district to fully teach and not repeat lessons every other day. With this technology, there's no reason not to teach all the concepts for the rest of this year and keep our kids from falling further behind. Two is to use this time to plan for returning elementary school students to school 5 days per week beginning January 16th with the second semester. Be transparent in sharing details with the plan of your plan with parents. And a few things need to be part of this. One is that Parkway needs to have a COVID testing plan for teachers and staff that includes the use of rapid testing. I've asked several times, so I know that there is currently absolutely no testing plan. Having testing in place is shown to be helpful in many other educational settings, and as I'm sure you're aware. And I recognize there are challenges. You've got to get the effective kind of test, not the one with the 50% fail rate, and you need some financial resources, but I'm sure you all can figure that part out. And then develop and share plans elementary school by elementary school on what will be done when people are positive for COVID or need to be quarantined. What's the tipping point for each school where there's not enough teachers to function effectively and safely?
Okay, thank you very much. Next, I have Joanna Filer.
Mrs. Filer, you can unmute and begin your statement.
All right, after reading the recommendation from Dr. Marty regarding moving middle school and high school to all virtual schooling, parents of the group Parkway Parents for In-Person Learning that has over 1,000 members request you vote no and do not accept his recommendation. Students need in-person learning. There is no justification to move in-person students to virtual. Out of the 17,338 students enrolled in Parkway, there was only 0.44% currently infected with COVID-19. That is less than 0.5% of the student population. To state that the spread of illness and quarantine is disruptive to middle school and high school is absurd. When a student is home for COVID-related reasons, they Zoom into the class as planned according to the return to school plan Parkway implemented. This has not created any disruptions in learning. To move middle school and high school to all virtual is reckless. Taking away the precious days these students were given for in-person will put Parkway students at risk again for grades dropping and further mental health issues. These teen years are the most important and impactful years at school. Credits are earned, Teens discover who they are and what kind of person they will become. This will directly impact college, trade school, and overall life after high school. This decision will damage their future. We choose to send our most precious, treasured children to Parkway schools. We did not choose to homeschool. We did not choose virtual academy. We choose in-person learning for our children because it is what's best for them. You must vote no and reject Dr. Marty's recommendation.
Thank you. Let's see. Next, we have Dan Mueller.
Good evening. My name is Dan. I have 2 elementary kids at McKelvey Elementary. I just want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for your leadership during this time. I know it's not easy. We moved here because of Parkway. We do believe it's the best school district in the state of Missouri, in the St. Louis area, and we still believe that. I'm here tonight to tell you that elementary hybrid does not work. Please hear me when I say it is not working. There's not an elementary parent that I know that feels that it is working. And I'm asking you tonight to reconsider that specific piece of the plan. To lay that out for you, between October 16th and November 9th, which is when elementary was told we were going 5 days, our students had 5 days of instruction, 5 days with a teacher in nearly a month's time. The hybrid option, first graders and fourth graders even cannot learn independently without a teacher. With the plan that you laid out, between Thanksgiving and January 7th, our elementary students will have 5 days of learning in a school building. Why are we doing this? Because the days that they're at hybrid, they do not have a live teacher interacting with them. We're reviewing curriculum. We're cutting our curriculum in half at that point. Literacy is so huge with our young kids, our first graders, our kindergartners, our second graders. There's not a way for these elementary students to learn independently like high school and middle schoolers. We have the ability now, just like the Wentzville School District's done, as you move your high schools and middle schools to online, you have the extra staff to staff your elementary schools properly. Wentzville's prioritized elementary learning to make sure that those kids can stay in school. If we look at our surrounding districts, since October 1st, most of those schools have been in 5 days a week. When I say that, I mean Rockwood, I mean Kirkwood, I mean Valley Park, Lindbergh, Ladue, Webster Groves, Clayton, not to mention all of your neighbors in St. Charles. Because of my profession, I work with over 100 schools in the St. Louis area, districts from St. Louis County, St. Charles County, Jefferson County, many of which have been in since August. I've seen these plans work, and I feel like we haven't given them an opportunity. Hybrid is bad for teachers, hybrid's bad for parents, but
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have Isaac Judy.
My name is Isaac Judy, and I am a junior at Parkway West High School. I would like to express my support for this recommendation. While I wished it was feasible to allow a choice between virtual and in-person schooling, the data clearly shows that it is not. Additionally, the school's faculty, the highest risk individuals there, largely did not get that choice. If this resolution is adopted, I implore the school not to make the same mistakes it made during the initial transition to virtual, that it will clearly communicate with teachers about any changes it is planning to make, and that it will design this new virtual system around providing the best learning experience rather than providing the quickest return to an in-person format. I do not want anyone, the faculty, the students, my friends, to die because we decided normalcy was more important than our safety. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Let's see, next up we have Taylor Johnson.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Taylor Johnson, and I'm a sophomore at West High. Within the past 2, almost 3 weeks of the second quarter, I've been in person at my school for a total of 2 days. I was so excited to see my teachers and my classmates again face to face, to be able to get some form of human interaction outside of the small circle of people I've seen since this quarantine began. However, after only 1 week in the hybrid schedule, I found myself emailing my grade principals to switch to a completely virtual schedule for the remainder of this quarter. Like many of my classmates, I had certain expectations in mind for in-person learning, expectations that obviously were not met. What I hadn't expected was the almost dead silence of my classrooms, hopping on Zooms while physically with the teacher, and social interaction so limited that I felt closer to my friends at home on a computer than at school while hybrid. I understand that the restrictions in place while in person are there for the safety of staff and students, and I commend the effort and hard work put in by teachers in such a short amount of time to follow these rules. For me personally, this experience was not worth the risk of possibly contracting COVID-19 or being exposed to it and having to quarantine for 2 weeks without any social communication. One of my friends was possibly exposed on Friday due to being in the same class as another student who tested positive. He just found out about this today from the school after almost 6 days of viable exposure. He got lucky, as he's already planned to switch over to the virtual schedule this week, but I know other students who are having to deal with the consequences of others' choices by staying quarantined when all they wanted was to be able to see people in a school setting. I'm aware that it was my personal choice to switch over and stay home, as it is the personal choice of many others to go in person. Unfortunately, with the systems and processes we have in place, as well as the skyrocketing amounts of cases in St. Louis and our country in general are facing right now, the best decision for Parkway, in my opinion, is to send most high school students back home. However, I feel that students within the special education sector of our district and middle schoolers should be allowed to remain in a hybrid setting. It's unfair to middle schoolers whose age group starts at 11 to lump them in with the rest of us much older students. I'm aware many parents may vehemently disagree with me, but after seeing the wave of high schoolers that have quickly turned around and gone virtual after just 1 week of in-person learning, I would have to disagree. Part of Parkway's job is to ensure the safety of our community through our student body. It may seem unfair, but Parkway's role as a public institution is to make the most ethical and positively impacting decisions possible, which right now would be to keep older students home. I also understand there's a great concern for mental health, but let's be honest, when isn't there?
Okay, are we back live? Mr. Brooks, are we back?
Yes, it wouldn't be a board meeting if I didn't make that mistake at least once.
That's okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Taylor. That was the end of Taylor's time. Next up, we have Pat McPartland.
Good evening. I'm Pat McPartland. I'm president of Parkway EA, the union representing the certified staff in the district. I speak tonight in response to potential changes in the learning model for the rest of the semester. There are 2 questions that I want to raise. First, is the proposed course of action safe for all of the district's learners and staff? And second, will it provide continuity of learning for all learners? District leaders citing data from the dashboard stated the concerns about transmission of the overall spread of COVID were reasons behind their proposal to move secondary students to virtual learning. The current blended model is seen as putting the health of students and staff at risk, which is a logical conclusion. Why is this concerted conclusion not extended to elementary students? The dashboard shows significant impact of students and staff in the elementary schools, but the district suggested that elementary age students had the lowest positivity rate among all age groups being tested, according to St. Louis County, and therefore there's no reason to change. But the county's data goes on to explain that this may reflect a relatively low number of tests for this age group rather than simply their lack of illness. In addition, the district mentions the possibility of school closures as a result of student illnesses or staff absences. This appears to be an acknowledgement that continuing the blended model at the elementary level is not safe. So why pursue it? Dr. Murdy spoke in August of making decisions to support the continuity of learning. The decision to move secondary students to the virtual model in the current proposal speaks to that goal. If continuity of learning is still an essential goal for all learners, then the proposed plan for elementary students fails to support it. Quarantines and potential closures clearly challenge continuity. In addition, the choice of some parents to have their students remain home rather than having them attend as part of the blended model creates new challenges for all. If that choice continues to grow, how is it sensible to maintain a blended model that's being opted out of? And what does it say about safety? There are 6 weeks before the winter holidays and then 2 weeks to finish the quarter. A stable, dependable structure of learning and teaching for all students, families, and staff set now will let the focus be on that teaching and learning and not on having to adjust to a continuing shifting of circumstances. All of Parkway's educators will continue the incredible work they have done in supporting the learning of their students. give all of them the opportunity to do so safely and to provide the continuity that students deserve to finish this quarter and semester. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Tracy Goldstein.
Hello, can you see me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Before I begin, I'd like to congratulate the National Merit winners. I recognized a lot of the names up there. I'm also very sad for a lot of those kids because they're not in school right now. And while I don't have a high schooler, I know it's a very difficult time. I actually had a speech prepared and I'm throwing that to the wind tonight. I got a really disturbing message on my phone that this is all pretty much a done deal, that the vote has actually occurred and that department leaders today have been telling teachers at school that they won't be coming back after Friday. I will be sharing that image with you on your Parkway email that I received. And I guess my question is are we really here to look at Dr. Marty's recommendation, or are we here to check the box? I think we've heard some really good suggestions tonight that perhaps we should table this vote and go back to the drawing board, Dr. Marty. We need to go back to the drawing board. You're hearing these kids. Every time you change the plan, you change our lives, and it is exhausting. I haven't talked to you all for 3 months. I am sad, I am tired, and I cannot handle this constant movement as a parent. So I can only imagine what this is doing to our kids. And it's because we don't have the right processes in place. Nikki Weinstein, who I respect, just gave you a great idea about COVID testing for kids. It's happening other places. Mr. Mueller talked to you about what other school districts are doing. It's happening other places. Please promise me.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Goldstein. And I apologize, it appears that I skipped over Ashley West. So hopefully Ashley is still in the queue. There we are.
Hi, my name is Ashley and I'm a junior at West High. I cannot sit back and watch you do this to us. I feel that you do not care about us or our needs. Please do not take away the few in-person days we are given. If you decide to make us go virtual again, it will mess up more of my future. My grades and GPA will drop again. I cannot learn online. Many of us cannot learn virtually. Every grade deserves the option of in-person school. This is important for the freshmen and seniors to get the year they deserve. Your decision tonight will affect my future, will affect the future of all Parkway students. Please vote no tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Next, we have Brandy Walton.
Do not believe Brandy Walton is in attendance.
All right. Next up then is Mary Brownell.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My student is a virtual student at West Middle School. The administrators, teachers, and staff have been amazing through this transition time. The constant change in class schedule time is causing an extreme amount of stress and anxiety on the students, and I would imagine the teachers, administrators, and staff as well. One of the many reasons we chose for our child to be part of the virtual campus was for consistency and stability. We did not want him to deal with a constantly changing schedule and chaotic environment we feared in-person would bring during this pandemic. Unfortunately, this has not been the case. In the short time since in-person learning has been in place, our child's schedule continues to be up in the air. Is it A day? Is it V day? Is it B day? Is it XYZ day? I do understand the thought process of keeping all the kids on the same schedule. How it is extremely unfair to the virtual kids to consistently keep changing when the in-person learning days have to change. During the first quarter of the year, we felt like things went very smoothly. This is not the case for second quarter. Your decision to rush back to school has had detrimental effects on my students and many other students' social and emotional well-being. You lengthen their day and you are constantly changing their schedule, and that is not what is best for kids. Assuming you make the right decision tonight and return all 6th through 12th grade students to virtual learning, please consider going back to the schedule used during the first quarter. It worked. If it becomes safe again to return to in-person learning, please take into consideration the virtual students. I feel they are being treated as second-class citizens and seem to be expected to roll with whatever works best for the in-person students. Also, please consider your teachers. As a teacher myself, the constantly changing schedule brings undue stress to them as well. They are doing the very best they can, and I certainly hope you will give them credit where credit is due. Give them the grace and understanding as we all navigate this time. Whether they are in person or a virtual teacher, they need consistency as well. Please do what is right for our kids and our staff. As you make your decision tonight, I also want to tell you that I think you should keep the PK through 5 kids at home as well, but that's another conversation and another 3 minutes that I am not allowed it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Lou Badami.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So as a parent from West Middle, I'm sorry, Parkway West High is where I'm coming from, a parent of 2 students there. I feel that there's a few things here. The option virtual versus in school, I think, is outstanding. Everybody gets their comfort level. I do note that on your website, there's a remarkable low amount of cases when you use the drop-down arrow for within Parkway schools and students. Last week, there were 3 positive cases versus 197 that were quarantined. So what you're doing in quarantining the students is absolutely working. What that shows us is that they're not communicating or they're not contracting the virus at school. They're contracting it outside of school. So and with that, the numbers, the 0.44% that was quoted earlier, which overall is well below the 5% threshold that was set. If I look at the school where my students or where my children are going at Parkway West High, we are still well below the 5% threshold, which was given per the website. So I see no reason to send these children home when they want to be in school and we're below the threshold. If we go above the threshold, I would absolutely see the reason to send the kids back home. However, I would ask that we follow what the other procedures are, and that's for 14 days. It's not through mid-January. For 14 days, we shut it down at that specific school, not the entire district, to be down for 14 days and then return. Those are all the things that are laid out in the expectations. And I would like to see those followed, not new rules created when certain schools are doing very well in their.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, let's see, I have Stuart O'Brien.
Mr. O'Brien, you can unmute.
Okay, am I on?
You are.
Is my video up?
It is not.
Oh, okay. Well, that's quite all right. In the short amount of time that I have, I wish I could defer time to Tracy Goldstein and Taylor Johnson, that brave girl from Parkway West. I come at this from a very unique perspective in that I have a high school student, I have a middle school student, and I have a very close family relative that works at an elementary school. Now, with the high school and middle schools being cleared out of children, but yet the elementary staff still in-house, shall we say, the staff is being asked to assume a far greater risk. And they say that young children seem to be less vulnerable to it themselves, but they still contract it, they still spread it, and the schools are the lungs of the community. Yes, pun intended or metaphor intended, in that people come together, they share everything, they go back home to the parents and their contacts, and then come back again the next day. Okay. So all this comes at a daily basis. There's a risk to everybody, and it seems to be disrupting the people that seem to make it possible, that being the staff. And I struggle with the current logic, because it seems like it's almost like allowing
Mr. O'Brien, you're muted again.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just teachers, students, supports, custodial services, food service workers. They're all being asked to assume this risk that they take home and bring back the next day. And I don't know if you heard my metaphor of the peeing section in the pool, but that's what we're allowing. So I think I just support the position that we be safe short-term for long-term gain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Idong Cheng.
I do not see that citizen in attendance.
Okay. After them, we have Rebecca Mira.
Mrs. Mira, you can speak now.
I'm here, sorry. Thank you for giving me the time to speak. I just really think that we have not really been giving a fair chance at the hybrid learning. 1 weekend and you're already wanting to pull it. I have had 3 daughters go through Parkway West High. My last one is there now. She is a freshman. Her first week back last week, she had a whole different personality. She was no longer depressed. She was motivated to do schoolwork. She was happy. She hadn't even seen the high school and was nervous about walking and everything. Her response to you guys pulling it in your email last night, she was like, what's the point anymore? Why are we even doing this anymore? So that's what I'm asking you. Why are we doing this anymore? There are multiple schools around the area that have been making this work. And we have not been able to do that. There's no solution at all. It's just take it away. And you keep dangling this carrot and saying we're going to go back, and then you pull it away again.
Ms. Mira, are you still there?
Yes. I don't know, where did you leave off with me? Anyway, I'm done. we prefer to be in school. My child needs it desperately, and I think there's many other schools around town that have been making it work, and I don't think we've really given it a fair chance. And I respect everybody's decision on where they're at the comfort level. Our comfort level is to be in. We'll wear the mask, we'll follow all the other rules, we'll do the quarantine. She just needs to be in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, I have Michael Burtz.
All right. Good evening, Dr. Marty, President Todd, Ms. Stover, members of the board and the Parkway community. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. So conditions in our community have worsened, and we must consider how to respond and how to serve both our mission and our responsibility to our students, their families, our personnel, and our community. I've studied the district's recommendations, and I'm here in support of these actions. I previously emailed you assessing the data and what it tells us. That data should include the status of our region's healthcare system, which at the current rate of admissions doubling bi-weekly is on the verge of being overrun. We're at a point that calls for action. What many fail to realize, perhaps because it hasn't hit them personally or closely, is that this is a fight for public health. Yes, fighting this battle requires individual responsibility and action, but it can only be suppressed and defeated through collective action. We are all in this together. You hear from those who argue how unfair it is to lose experiences, to suffer socially, to miss sports, or to face challenges in distance learning. Yes, it is unfair, and we must do all we can, especially for those with learning needs. However, it's also unfair in a pandemic to not do your part and not speak up for those harmed when we don't take that collective action, to speak up for teachers or others at risk, or those that wind up in an overstressed healthcare system. Unfair for them too. We can look at the direness of the data and see that it's just math. Transmission is currently out of control and spreading on a base number of infections that's roughly 4 times higher than it was back in September. That's why we need to act now, because failure to do so risks the second semester too. But the reality is also that these numbers we see, these case counts, the hospitalizations, and yes, deaths, every single one of these represents a person. They're our family members, our teachers, our friends. I respect the dedication of the district and its staff and their diligent efforts for our students. The time has come, and I urge you to take action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will go back through. We had 4 that did show up. So Mr. Rooks, do we have Barb Gross anywhere in the queue?
No, Ms. Gross.
How about Stephanie Fortis?
Stephanie Fortis has joined us.
Okay.
Hi, are you ready for me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Very well, thank you. Stephanie Fortis, and I have a stepdaughter at West High and a stepdaughter at West Middle. We chose for them the virtual option early on, and I know that you have taken this very seriously, and I appreciate the amount of time that you all have put into this. I'm not going to come at this from a perspective of the students because I've heard the comments and they all seem to be coming from the perspective of the students. I'd like to share with you quickly, last week I spent a week in the St. Luke's Hospital with my 87-year-old father. We were on the COVID floor. He was in there for a kidney issue, but it is very true what they say that there is no space in the hospital. The beds are full. I also have a law practice, and as essential workers, we've had employees in the office. The younger employees, the 20-somethings, it is true, they are out. They are out whether we want them to be out or not. And the problem with that is the limitations that we have for the testing. So for example, your 20-year-old assistant is out at the winery on Saturday. She doesn't realize that she's been exposed until Tuesday. She goes in and takes a test, and 5 days later she finds out she's positive. If you're that parent and you're driving kids to school and you're taking kids around and can't stop your life in quarantine for the 5 days that you're waiting for the test results to come back. And in all honesty, it's not practical to just stop what you're doing in quarantine for 5 days. The point of it is the limitations with the testing that we have right now don't allow people to stop their lives and stop what they are doing altogether and quarantine. Ergo, what happens is people go out into the community.
Okay, thank you very much. We also were missing Brandy Walton.
Mrs. Walton is not in attendance.
Okay, and how about Adong Chang?
Also not in attendance.
Okay. Again, thank you all for your comments. You will certainly receive a response on behalf of the board in the coming days. Next, we'd like to approve our agenda for this evening. May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda for the regular meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for November 18th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. The annual board workshop will take place on Wednesday, December 2nd, 2020, beginning at 5 p.m. Next regular board meeting will take place on Wednesday, December 9th, 2020, beginning at 7 p.m. Next up, board liaison reports. Anyone have anything they'd like to share?
I can start. Just a couple quick thoughts to put out there before we get into tonight. The fact that I think hope we all can agree, we all have the same goal. We all want our kids back in 5 days. And I'll share for me, I do have a high school freshman. It was fun having her have her first real high school day in high school last week. And as a dad, I did the cheesy thing, got a photo of her going off. And it was exciting. I enjoyed it. I want that to happen more. But the challenge we have right now is the fact that for Parkway and all school districts, we are living in a world where action and non-action at the regional level, the state level, and the federal level is impacting us. We have to respond to it. It's unfortunate, but it's the world we live in. We cannot control everything that happens within our Parkway community. So tonight, our vote will be based on what we know right now, the facts that we have and the data that we have. And then we're going to try to do what is the safest and best for our kids to learn. And I just looking ahead, I do hope, because what our actions now will indicate whether we can go back later. And I do hope that we all have the same goal, that for the third quarter, we can get back to 5 days. But we as a community, as a region, as a state, and as a country, need to do better. And I just implore everybody to wear your mask, keep your distance, and avoid large groups, because I do want your kids and my kid to get back to 5 days.
Thank you, Matt.
Matt, I think that was exceptionally well said. And I don't want to try to elaborate too much on it because I really think you hit kind of what we're all sort of feeling and thinking. I want to talk about something sort of related, which is board members, and I'm sure the superintendent and employees, we're inundated with emails and other sorts of communications. And tonight we listened to some other, concerned citizens. All of these viewpoints are valid. Everybody wants, like Matt said, the same thing. We all want what's best for our kids and for our community. It's just a peek behind the curtain. We're not here tonight to vote yes or no on Dr. Marty's recommendation. Dr. Marty's recommendation is the result of a district-wide effort of people that care a lot and know a lot, putting their best efforts into coming up with a solution that achieves what Matt was just talking about. How do we get to what we all want at the earliest opportunity? And so while I don't expect that everyone knows exactly how a school district is run, we're not here to talk about Dr. Marty's recommendation. We're here to talk about what our district has, what is the result of the things that great people with the best of intentions have come up with. And, we're here to ask questions. We're here to fine tune a solution that gets to achieve what Matt was talking about. So I hope the community realizes that we're, the 7 of us aren't here to vote yay or nay on, one person's idea. We're here to help, come up with, to implement the recommendations of a lot of really talented and good people. So, and we're all in this together.
Well, my 2 colleagues said most of the things that I would say. Prove things that have been put together by the talented and educated staff of our district. I'd like to put a little bit of a human face on this. I'm a parent in this district. I have a middle schooler and I have a high schooler. I chose. Our experience has been mixed. The first day my middle schooler went back to school and he had 14 days of quarantine. He went back to school on Thursday. And he's not going to, due to a sore throat and a stuffy nose, he is now pending COVID testing. He got tested yesterday and we have to wait. My personal experiences are not what color my decision as a board member. But I think everybody needs to know that everyone on this board is involved deeply in this school district as parents, as community members. And we do know what people are going through because we are going through it with you. I was really happy to have my kids back in school. With one of them, it was very short-lived. And our goal is to get them back, but it's not a straight line, especially not with what our community is dealing with right now. So I just hope that you all will give everyone involved in these decisions some grace, because these are decisions we never expected to have to make. But we're doing it, and we're doing the best that we know how to do.
Debbie, Christie, or Sam?
Just want to mention that the Equity Task Force had met last Thursday. A lot of progress is being made by each of the groups that are discussing various recommendations. I happen to be working with the recommendation to develop and support administrators to provide an opportunity for equity within their areas of division of responsibility. A lot of good ideas are coming forth. We have students on our group, and they're very insightful and they have some great suggestions and ideas. So we hope a lot of good's going to come out of this as time goes on.
Thank you, Sam.
I'll just comment about some of the subcommittee work that's being done with reviewing current board policies. I participated along with some of my colleagues on both the finance policy review as well as student services review. So that is ongoing, and we do, because of COVID, have started taking a look at some of our student services policies and with that lens. Along with the work on our equity task force, have also started to take a look at some of our policies through that lens as well. So that's primarily what we've been doing on that front. I would just say on the matter of this evening's decision, I have to say I spent on Friday over 2.5 hours listening to all of the live press conferences that took place with Dr. Garza's St. Louis Metropolitan COVID Task Force. I also listened to Sam Page's press conference and had numerous conversations with personal friends of mine who are physicians and pediatricians. The bottom line is that we have, and I somewhat resent some of the emails that have come to our way in support of my colleagues. We are not the Nuremberg trials here. We are not part of a book titled the Resetting the Code. And we are elected officials who have decided to be on the school board for the betterment of our educational system. And we all have students in this district, and we care very much for not just our students, but our teachers. And to say that we are cowards or that we don't care is really not accurate. And I would just like to ask our community to please be respectful of the decision that we are going to have to make tonight. I don't think anybody wants to be in the position that we are all in tonight. Can only speak for myself. I have lost sleep over this. I have cried over this. I have talked to people, done research, and to say that we don't care is just not true. So please, as a community, respect our decision. Because it's difficult and it is a 50-50 win here. We are not gonna make some people happy and we're gonna make other people very upset. And so what choice do we have? This is all out of our control. We did not bring COVID on. I would say that we're going to continue and our board will continue to press our administrators to make sure that we are delivering a quality education, but we also have to take it upon ourselves as the greater good of this community and the public health matter. When we see physicians getting emotional because of the state of our healthcare system from our statewide and our local standpoint, these are physicians who generally are our caretakers and the people who set the pace for being calm, cool, and collected, and they're getting emotional over this. Something needs to be done. So we have got to take the stance, we have got to be brave, and we have got to start making some sacrifices. We're not normal right now, and we all have to make sacrifices. And some of the sacrifices are doing some very painful things. And I just ask that everybody just take a breath. We will constantly continue to try to make sure that we are giving the best education to our students under extraordinary circumstances. And everybody is working very hard to make that happen. I just ask that you please respect the decision tonight. Continue to communicate with us. Thank you for everybody who has written into us, but please respect our decision this evening and continue to work with us in understanding the reasons behind why we may have to do some of the very difficult things that are needing to be done.
Thank you, Debbie. And I'll just echo what pretty much everybody else said, that we are hearing from lots of people. I mentioned it before. We're hearing from parents and groups of parents with no significant amount one versus the other. So we do feel like we're hearing from a good cross section of our district, not just parents, but students and teachers. And we've even received emails from some grandparents that have grandkids in the district. And we really do value all of those. I think one of the things that we miss, that I miss personally, is going to school events. Even though my son graduated and my youngest graduated a year and a half ago or two years ago, I still miss going to those events. I miss seeing what kids are doing, but I also miss talking to parents and in that interaction. And I look forward to when I can get back and do that. But those are the times that we really kind of hear what's going on in the district and what's going on in student classrooms and things like that. So we do appreciate the emails that we've gotten, all of them. And we'll continue, we'll try our best to respond to them in a timely manner. I know Dr. Marty and I got through as many as we could get through today, but we'll continue on down the list as we go. I do want to mention today is National Education Support Professionals Day. So I want to give a shout out to all the people that fall under that umbrella, from our facilities crews, our secretaries, food service workers, and custodians, and so many other support staff who help keep schools running day after day. I also want to mention that I think it was Debbie that mentioned, be respectful. I don't care what you. I mean, I get all the emails. I try and respond to them all. I can take whatever anybody sends my way. But I'd ask you, to be respectful of your neighbors. There's so many people, we heard lots of differing opinions tonight, and I see it on social media. And I was hopeful that with the election behind us, that maybe some of that would kind of settle down. But I just ask you to just be thankful for who you have around you, your neighbors. You might not always agree with them, but when it comes down to it, they're always there for you. So I'd ask you to just continue lifting each other up and be there and support everybody else's opinion, even if it's not the same as yours. Be respectful that they have that opportunity to share that. So I think that's all we have for reports from the board. Dr. Marty, is there anything you'd like to add? You're muted.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm sorry. I just want to take this opportunity to mention that many of our schools, and specifically staff members in schools, whether they be music departments or others, took their time even during this time of busyness and interruptions to celebrate Veterans Day on November 11th. And I was just so proud of them. They certainly sent greetings, in many cases recognized within their own school community grandparents, parents, and others who served, teachers and their families. I also want to continually remind our community of the needs of many of our families. Our food pantry is still operating. In fact, yesterday was a major distribution day for Thanksgiving. I want to thank the contributions coming in. I want to thank our volunteers. It is so amazing that that so many are stepping up, but I have to tell you, the needs are there. We're providing Thanksgiving meals for literally hundreds of Parkway families. And so there's certainly needs here in our community, and we're attempting to meet them. And I just want to again thank those that are contributing and supporting the food pantry, especially at this holiday time. And then finally, I've been able to visit schools carefully. I certainly don't want to add to the problems of the schools in terms of my presence, but I just have to say I want to salute our educators, our leaders. Our schools are operating well, and in the blended model at all levels, people are working very, very hard, and teachers are doing their very, very best. And I will say that I'll just say at the elementary level, the feedback was that a lot is being accomplished, smaller numbers, but a lot is being done. And we heard some speakers concerned about not being there fully, but in the time that they're there, they're working very, very hard. And I just want to salute our educators at all levels, middle and high school as well, for the work that they've been doing. We've really asked them to do a lot, and they've responded. And I hope at this Thanksgiving time that we all can send a note of thanks to our teachers, our educators, our support personnel, anybody who's associated with our children and their education. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, I have no board subcommittee reports, no upcoming subcommittee meetings to report. So we'll move on to 10.0, which is action items. We have an average size list, which the board has already reviewed. So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented in the November 18th, 2020 board materials?
So moved.
Second.
Is there anything to be pulled to action or closed? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to action items. We have an action item, which is the approval of the 2020-2021 fall revised budget. So I would like to introduce Patty Bedborough, our Chief Financial Officer, to bring this to our attention.
Good evening, President Todd, Vice President Hopper, Dr. Marty, Mrs. Stover, members of the Board of Education in our community. Today, I'd like to bring to you our budget revisions for this current school year. Next slide, Nikki. Oh. As she's queuing that up, I will just say the story, if I had to attach a story to our budget development this year, it would definitely be a story of a roller coaster ride. We've had some record lows and some sharp twists and turns along the way. But with that, I know that we have some security that has been brought in with some of our stimulus dollars that we have received. Nikki, do you need me to share my screen?
Oh, I'm getting it. I apologize.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. So with that, you may recall that when we were in the spring and looking ahead at this budget and with the preliminary budget that we brought forward, we were looking at needing to have over $1 million in reductions for this year, which we did identify. And with that, it included an elimination of an administrative position. It included moving personalized learning to a future year. It included the reduction of building manager positions, some extra duty positions, a finance position. Those were all positions that were open, essentially, with the exception of the building manager jobs. We also looked into the future and saw that possibly in next fiscal year, we may have up to a $5 million reduction to make. Nikki, could you advance 3 slides? There you go. One more. So as we get into this year, one of the things that we had in reserve, if you will, was approximately $3 million in recoupment from the year prior. That normally when we levy recoupment, we put that in our capital projects fund. But due to possibility of greater shortfalls, we decided that we would levy that recoupment into our operating fund, and it gives us increased flexibility, because certainly if we don't need it in the operating fund, we can transfer it into the capital projects fund. But if it was levied into the capital projects fund, it could not be moved into the operating fund to cover any deficit. The other thing is, when we were doing our spring budget, we looked at the sales tax revenue, or Proposition C revenues. And because we were in the middle of the shutdown, where businesses, restaurants, and stores were closed, we anticipated a sharp decline in the sales tax revenue. Well, while we saw a decline in the sales tax revenue, it certainly was not a sharp decline, and it was not a long-lasting decline. So initially, we looked at this year and put in $950 per weighted ADA, weighted average daily attendance. But since then, we are revising that, and we have increased that to $1,000 per weighted ADA. That's a change of about $750,000 for us. Another large revenue impact is our M&M surtax. Last year, you may recall that it was one of our best years on a collection rate that we have received probably in the last decade. With that, it also meant that we had an increase in our M&M surtax that was collected. So seeing that, we have slightly increased our projections for this year's for the M&M surtax as well. Now to get into a few of the reductions. Of course, with early childhood, not only were we virtual for 1 quarter, we also have decreased class sizes in all of our tuition rooms. So we have reduced our projection for tuition for this year. We've also drastically reduced our food service revenues. So not only having the 1 quarter on virtual learning, we also have our local revenues that will essentially be zero, because we know that we will be receiving federal funding through the USDA for meals for all of our students, so both virtual and in person. But we also are seeing that we have much lower participation than normal. So we have made that adjustment. In the foundation formula, which is our state funding, We do have a proration factor. It started as a pretty hefty proration factor in the month of July, and now it's estimated to be a 7% to a 3% reduction for the year. We've then added in our CARES Act and our stimulus funding. So an overall change in our operating revenues is an increase of $2,344,147. Nikki, next page. So now to speak of some of the changes in our expenditures. One of our most profound increases, of course, has been our PPE and our COVID expenditures. And this is supplies for our staff and for our students for their protection. We've added into the budget 1.7 million for these expenditures. Our budget carry forward, so this is our normal time of year that our budget managers, so whether it is our school principals or our SAT members, our directors review their budgets from last year, and then they can make specific requests for carryover funds into this year's budget, and they need to match goals and of course be provided with account codes as well. We have a loss of the Parkway Rockwood Community Ed program, which we will describe in a little more in depth in a future slide. We have our CARES funding that we need to do as a pass-through for our public entities. So part of our CARES Act funding was provided to us from the federal government. And then we're asked then to distribute it to our local private entities as well. We have an increase for sub costs because we know with the COVID cases that are present in our community, that has triggered both quarantines and isolation of our staff members as well. So the additional cost is input into our budget to cover those additional sub costs. We do have salary savings that we have implemented into the budget. So earlier this year, we did have a voluntary furlough program. We had about 100 positions that were kept open and unfilled until we returned to in-person learning. We also had some savings in some of our extra duty positions as well. As mentioned in the revenue discussion, there were reductions in the food service revenue. Well, with that, we also have a corresponding savings in our food service supplies. With serving less meals, there's less demand for some of the supplies that are needed. And then we also have a change in our total unexpended expected expenditures. So a net increase in operating expenditures of $826,000 and our $826,340. Next slide, please. Just a summary of our grants and our stimulus money. We've received a Missouri Connectivity Grant. This was a match 50-50 for some of our hotspots. We have federal seamless summer option, which is the funding option that helps us to provide meals to our students. So both in person and virtually as well. So the total amount of that award is to be determined, but it runs through June 30th. We have the Missouri Transportation Supplement Grant. The total award was just about $154,000, and that's over 2 years. So this has allowed us to have some sanitization equipment that is on our buses and additional supplies, PPE for our bus drivers as well. We have our CARES ESSER funds, so $875,664, with $190,000 of that allocated to our private schools in the area. We have a governor's CRF funds of $1.1 million that help to fund not only our building subs, but also some excess PPE that we ordered as well. COVID response supply grant, that was a 75-25 grant with partnering the county with DESE. So that was right around $500,000. And that's what it did. It provided supplies. So included everything from barriers that you may see in our classrooms to additional hand sanitizer that was purchased. We have the COVID childcare relief program funding for early childhood and $100,950. We have approval for a FEMA grant, which will cover 75% of PPE that was purchased through mid-September. So that should be right around $100,000 to $150,000. Missouri Student Connectivity Grant. So this is type A. So our amount on this is still to be determined. This is adding connectivity points, building access points to the outside of our building. So we have not fully identified everything that would be in use there. Missouri CARES Act for unemployment. The total amount funded is still to be provided, but they essentially are paying 50% of our unemployment claims at this time. And then with St. Louis County Library CARES Act, they provided 300 hotspots for our families. So a total award of over $3 million. So that is, just tremendous support for the district. Now to go into a little bit more in depth on the Parkway Rockwood Community Ed. As you know, with being virtual and many of the programs being shut down, it certainly has forced the community ed program to cancel much of their programming. The hardest impact has truly been with the Adventure Club. If we compare the Adventure Club this year to last year we had 1,249 students enrolled. And remember, they can enroll up to 5 days a week. Our current enrollment is 472 students for 2 days a week. So it is less than half of the possible days. And of course, almost 1/3 of the students. So that has certainly caused a financial strain on the system and in the program. They are working to come up with solutions, with possible employee changes, et cetera. But at this point, they're estimating a loss of $1.5 million for the year. So that has been placed into the budget. In discussions with Mike Seppi, he does anticipate that we'll have a loss for next year as well. So we will be building that into our next year budget as well. Next page, Nikki. So where does this put us? So as you can see, our revised fall budget by line item, and of course the details of this are included in your board packet. But overall, we did have an increase in revenues of $2,344,147. One of the largest line items with an impact, as mentioned earlier, is our property taxes. And then the second highest, well, I guess our highest, is federal, with the $4 million increase. And then the property taxes, and then of course, Proposition C. Next slide. And then when we're looking at our expenditures, we do have a net increase there. And as you can see, one of the largest impacts have been our purchase services and our supplies, where we've added in for our carryover requests and for our PPE, and then also the reduction of salaries as well. When we put this all together, we do end up with our strategic goal of growing the fund balance by the 0.25%. So we ended last year with 23.85%. And this year we are projecting at this moment to finish at 24.11%. Next slide. So what are our next steps? We are currently working on our budget development assumptions for next year, and we will be presenting them at our board meeting in December. Any questions?
While the board is just thinking about some questions, I just want to say that the board saw a memo recently from Patty in terms of all the grant money, the COVID CARES money. I just want to thank her. I just am amazed. She just stays on top of these. And I just think since people are watching this board meeting, they have to really appreciate Patty's attention and her stewardship to making sure that dollars available to the district are applied for. This isn't just come our way. There has to be work and application and communication. So Patty, thank you so much. You have been on top of it. You've been so attentive to federal, state, local dollars. And I think I'm just so thankful again for your stewardship and that of your department. I also will just say, Patty does such a wonderful job of certainly watching in detail, the expenditures and revenues. And when we sat down recently with Mike Seppi, Community Ed, it was a tough meeting, but we also have benefited from Community Ed over the years. And now in a downtime, we certainly want to stick with it. We want to make sure that we can return someday to the vital opportunity that Venture Club and all the other programs at Community Ed. But there will be a little bit of a downtime, and we have to participate in that just as we participate in the good times. So, but I board members, I want you to know how thankful we are and the benefit we have of having Patty and her skills and her attention to details when it comes to a bit of the tough times we're going through right now. Patty's done a wonderful job.
Patty,
Thank you, Dr. Marty.
Patty, just what's giving you heartburn looking beyond this school year? What are your concerns right now, or maybe even hopes as you look out beyond the school year?
So definitely one of my biggest concerns is commercial property. So I know that currently our state tax commission is not meeting. They plan to meet in the spring. So we do have a docket, if you will, of outstanding cases with protest tax and settlements. But what we don't know with this upcoming reassessment year is where the commercial market will fall. So while we're in a pandemic, we're not alone. Many businesses are working from home. We know some large companies, including hospital systems, have declared already that they're not returning to their offices. They will remain working from home. So not knowing exactly the impact of that on our office space, but then what does that do to our retail and unfortunately our restaurants as well too, because they are very, very stretched thin. So just not sure where that market trend is going to take us. Now, I will say with pretty much confidence, our real estate market is strong. So it has been, driven probably most likely by the record low mortgage rates, but our real estate market has, just been tremendous. Homes don't remain on the market. They sell over the listing price. It's certainly been a seller's market there. So those are, really some of my top concerns is really where's that commercial market going to land? And even with this upcoming year being a reassessment year, just the potential future considerations for protests with that too, if it is a partially filled office building, if it is a partially filled retail center, et cetera, I think that could trigger some loss or at least stagnation of revenue for us. This upcoming year too, we know that right now the CPI is a 0.9%, so that is not very much growth. But I will say, when we were looking at that in May and April, we were actually looking at like maybe a 0.5% growth. So it's a little bit higher than that. But like I said, the most at risk is our commercial property for certain.
Patty, I'll ask, have there been any further concerns with the funding formula? Has that become pretty stable at this point, or what's the status of that?
So initially in July, it had a proration factor, a reduction of 22%. Since then, that has gotten better. So they are predicting that the end of the year should be between a 3 to a 7% reduction. So not a huge reduction for us. There is a bill currently in the Senate to utilize CARES funding. And right now, it states that it would be utilized by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and potentially to help stabilize the formula. So hopefully, that'll help us bring us, back to a lower proration factor. So, getting back to whole. This is one of the times that it's very beneficial to be a district that is dependent more on local taxes and not on state. Because when we have these big fluctuations for us, because it's less than 5% of our total revenue, it doesn't have as much of an impact for us as what it does to some of our neighboring districts.
Thank you.
Patty, you mentioned something about a $5 million deficit coming up within the next year, I believe.
So we did predict that when we were looking at our multi-year forecasts in May and June. We are revising that. We're working on that now. Both Brian and I are really reviewing each and every line item to see, where things are. Part of that estimate had a really low Prop C number in there, and we know that the sales tax collections for the state have really been stable. They did not plummet like we predicted. So that will be one of the revenue sources for sure that we will be increasing, and we'll be bringing those new estimates for you at our December board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any other questions for Patty? Well, I'll just echo Dr. Marty's comments that Patty does such a great job, and her team do such a great job at compiling this data and presenting it in a way that we can understand it and it makes sense. And we're just very appreciative that we have you in our corner, and we're able to get through this so easily. So thank you very much.
Oh, and thank you. And, just a shout out to my team as well, because it is not one person, it is collectively all of us working together. And it's a shout out to all of our administrators as well, because if they weren't good stewards of money and utilizing their budgets and such too, we would not be in the financial situation that we are. So totally, it takes all of us to make all this happen.
Thank you. So may I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education approve the 2020-2021 expenditure budget as presented by the administration in the amount of $307,416,932 with $87,210,319 to be expended from the general fund, $156,618,747 from the special revenue fund, $40,837,866 from the capital projects fund, and $22,750,000 from the debt service fund.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please, Nikki.
Ms. Davis? Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopper?
Yes.
Mr. Schindler?
Yes.
Dr. Ciartino?
Yes.
Mr. Seltzer?
Jeff, what was the number from the special revenue fund?
You always do that to me.
Yes.
Mr. Todd?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. We have no policy review tonight. I'm hopeful that we'll have some policy review here shortly. As Debbie mentioned, we're working on that, so it's coming. Next up, we have 13.0, which is the report, current status of COVID, school operations, and future plans. So I will turn it over to Dr. Marty to begin.
Well, thank you. Again, board members, thank you. Your comments leading into this discussion were appreciated, and I again, heartfelt, and I know all of you are taking this this very seriously. one of the things we promised at our last board meeting in person was that we would be committed to making a decision about the rest of the semester in a timely manner. And we think it's only fair to our parents, our students, and our staff certainly that they have time to prepare for the remainder of the semester, which takes us through January 15th this year. We go into the month of January with this year's semester. So we have been working, and I appreciated somebody saying this isn't Dr. Marty's plan. This is really a collaborative plan that has been developed with input from our building principals and from our, obviously from many people who are working with our teachers, and certainly looking at information and data around what is happening in the health front. So this is Dr. Marty making a recommendation, but it's Dr. Marty after a lot of collaboration bringing this recommendation to the board tonight. So tonight we want to go a little bit deeper. So family members, you did receive a very lengthy memo or information from us that detailed a little bit about the status we are in, and also giving you a preview of the recommendation coming to the board tonight. We want to go a little bit deeper. And if you saw the communication from Mr. Todd and I, we did tell you that we would have more information to provide for the board tonight. We're trying to provide the board ongoing information. So the board is constantly every week from me and from Dr. Wallen and from so many other sources are receiving information. So the board is working with us and we're keeping them as informed as we possibly can, and our educators. And hopefully you feel through our dashboard and other ways we're trying to keep all of you informed. So we're going to take you through a little background here, starting with Dr. Wallen, who is constantly watching what is going on the health front, regionally, locally, at the same time managing what is going on within the district. Robin has led all aspects of our health and safety monitoring here. And one of the things that she obviously does is be attentive to those reports of possible positivity, and then works with the health department on quarantining and isolation. And while she does all that, she also certainly tries to maintain and manage all the other responsibilities of her work, which is the ongoing health and safety of children and all the medications and all. Now that they came back to school, certainly a lot of work around that. So Robin, we appreciate your ongoing work, and we just want to keep you healthy. So Dr. Wallen, we're going to start with you tonight just to provide an update for the board and the community. And I will tell you as we get into this, as we have almost every time we gather as administrators, we have Robin give us a report. And of late, it's almost like we'd rather not have Dr. Wallen there, because it has not been the kind of data that we were hopeful for at this time. We certainly were seeing much hopeful data a month ago, but the last several weeks has been, and I know Dr. Wallen is as disappointed and as worried as anybody about some of this data. So Dr. Wallen first, and then proceeding after Dr. Wallen, we will have Dr. Watson, Dr. Beckner talk a little bit more about what has been happening in terms of the school operations, what work has been underway, and now what are some of the changes that we're proposing due to some of the things we're seeing relative to a student attendance and just the operations of the work that we put in place. And we'll finish eventually with Paul Tandy, rather, kind of finishing with a timeline. So we'll again take the board through a series of reports. And again, Dr. Wallen, if you would start us off, please.
Good evening, President Todd, Vice President Hopper, members of the board, Dr. Marty, Mrs. Stover. Tonight, I'll be sharing with you the COVID-19 data trends that are impacting our school district and informing some of our serious concerns over the past few weeks. Next slide. As I've shared with you before, we have implemented some significant mitigation, prevention, and response strategies in Parkway to help prevent the spread of infection and respond to exposures to COVID-19 in our schools and district offices. Ongoing mitigation measures include the district-wide mandate for wearing masks, frequent cleaning and sanitizing of high-touch surfaces, promoting hand hygiene, and asking all students and staff to perform daily health screenings and stay home if they're sick. We also have developed detailed protocols for contact tracing, isolation, and quarantine, and we've implemented all of these under the guidance of the St. Louis County Department of Public Health. So let's turn for a moment and look at some of the COVID-19 data points that we're following really closely. Here on this slide, the St. Louis County Department of Public Health has reported that between October 27th and November 9th, the average number of new COVID-19 cases diagnosed in St. Louis County residents increased by 124%. Perhaps even more striking, average daily diagnoses have increased by 365% since October 6th, and the current daily rate of diagnoses is alarmingly high. The 7-day average of new cases diagnosed each day in the county is now 815. St. Louis County hit a stark record on Monday. For the first time since COVID-19 pandemic began, the county reported an additional 1,061 new cases in a single day, which brought the cumulative total of cases for the county to over 42,000. This health department graph, which I've shared with you many times over the many months, is a dramatic depiction of the recent steep rise in cases over the past month, and we do not see any evidence that the increase is slowing down. To date, 921 county residents have died due to the COVID-19 virus. Next slide. Transmission of COVID-19 is widespread throughout St. Louis County populations, and substantial increases have been measured across all age groups, all racial and ethnic groups, and all geographic areas. However, the rates are currently the highest among 20 to 29-year-olds and residents of the county's south and west regions. Between 10/27 and 11/9, positivity among people tested for COVID-19 increased among all age groups. The positivity rate is currently highest among 10 to 19-year-olds at 21.1% and lowest among 0 to 9-year-olds at 11.2%, with rates between 15 and 20% for all other age groups. Next slide. The summary of the key indicators that we've been following for many months shows the regional comparison for daily new cases, transmission, and positivity rates. EdPlus compiles these statistics for school districts twice weekly, and here we see the daily new case rate of 75.53 per day per 100,000 in St. Louis County. In addition to this dramatic increase, we also see a transmission rate of 1.23. You'll remember that this means that each individual with COVID is infecting an additional 1.23 people. And there's actually this exponential increase as this rate increases. Finally, our positivity rate, which you may remember back when we started to make the decision to bring back in-person learning, was hovering just above 4%, is currently 21%, which is a huge increase over the recommendations that that rate be less than 5%. Next slide. I also wanted to share some data specific to school-age children in our county and school district. Here you see the data by age group that the state compiles. For comparison, I'm sharing the graph on the left that I shared with you back in October on the 21st, and then today's graph, which is depicting a dramatic increase in the incidence of COVID-19 cases in St. Louis County in all age groups of youth, but especially among 10 to 14-year-olds and 15 to 17-year-olds. Next slide. We also have some state data that looks at the number of youth who live in the Parkway School District boundaries that subsequently test positive for COVID-19. And although the state has not updated these numbers in the past week, we already can see the concerning trend of the increasing numbers of cases of COVID-19 amongst our youth. From October 28th to November 11th, we see that a full 1/3 of the total cases for ages 5 to 9 and 10 to 14 happened in that 2-week period. Next slide. We also have very rich data now on our community health dashboard, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Today, we have 78 students who are actively positive for COVID and 629 in quarantine. We also have 27 staff who are actively positive and 130 in quarantine. Next slide. But when you look at the aggregate numbers for students, there have been 1,130 students who've been in quarantine since the beginning of October and 220 that have had COVID-19 and been in isolation. This translates to potentially 11,240 lost days of school just since school started a very few weeks ago. Next slide. Likewise for our staff, there have been 229 staff members in quarantine and 90 in isolation for infection. And this translates to 3,132 lost days of work. Next slide. Another way to look at this is the trajectory of isolation and quarantine cases. Here you see students with a positive test over time. It's worth noting that this week we will likely exceed the week of November 9th for both students and staff. And you can see that with every subsequent week, our numbers are going up. Next slide. This is a similar graph looking at staff isolation. Next slide. And here is student quarantine over time. You see the number increasing each week. Next slide. And this is staff quarantine over time. Next slide. Of interest too is looking at the grades of students who are positive and isolated, which you see here. You note that on average, the older grades have higher numbers of students who are actively positive. Next slide. And we see a similar trend with quarantines, with older students having higher numbers of quarantines. These dramatic, next slide. So these dramatic numbers have led to questions specifically about how decisions for quarantine and isolation are being made. I want to emphasize that we are making all decisions based on guidance by the St. Louis County Department of Public Health. Our health department has chosen to continue to follow CDC guidance about quarantine after close exposure to COVID-19, and not the recommendations of that the governor made last week, which would loosen quarantine requirements for school-age children. Our public health authorities feel that it is not wise to make this change at the height of the current wave in the pandemic. Next slide. As I've shared here before, we have a robust team of trained case investigators who are working with each individual who's positive to identify potential close contacts and implement appropriate isolation and quarantine protocols. Our contact tracing coordinators, school nurse Becky Cartmill and myself, are serving as liaisons between our schools and the health department to help determine dispositions in each case. It's worth noting here that due to the enormity of new cases that our county has been experiencing, the health department is no longer able to do any contact tracing. So the burden of this work, at least within our school district, is falling on our school nurses and administrators. Next slide. So in conclusion, as I reflect on these very sobering data trends, we need to acknowledge that we are in a public health crisis nationally, locally, and even within our own school district. It will take drastic change and a commitment on the part of everyone to bring down the current infection rates. Isolation and quarantine of students and staff is having a significant impact in our district and on the continuity of instruction. This work is also taking a significant time and effort by many key members of our educational teams. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share the reality of where we are as seen in the data. I know that this is historically an extremely difficult time, and I'm grateful for your careful deliberation of our data as it informs decisions you will make for our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. I just would add that, and I know Dr. Wallen is also in contact with peers. I meet oftentimes several times a week with the local superintendents. In a meeting today, there's not a school district that is not facing some pretty serious decisions like us. And some school districts have already made some determination of closing schools, going back to virtual, or making changes at levels. I think we're going to see that. The discussion today, there was just a lot of worry, a lot of concern, a lot of districts facing shortages in personnel to be able to keep schools going. So I don't think I know we're not alone. And I think sometimes just because we're not hearing a lot from other districts doesn't mean there's a lot of work going on to keep schools operations going, certainly in other places as well. This is a crisis that is hitting the whole region. Board members, we'll move forward, and Dr. Wallen, will be available if you have questions later, but I am now going to turn over to Dr. Watson and Dr. Beckner to give you kind of a review of what has happened. The first thing up here is certainly the recommendation for you to see and for them to provide the information to provide support for why we're making the recommendation we are. Again, that recommendation is that our elementary students in grades K-5 would continue in the blended schedule through the end of the semester, while our middle and high school students 6 through 12 would return to distance learning. Frankly, there was many of us, and I will say probably Dr. Beckner and myself, who really went into this period of time wanting to bring our elementary students back full time. But the realization of the current trends, and also what we were seeing in the case of what that meant in terms of bringing more students back, and the risks, and our principals really worried about that. We believe that maintaining the blended model, which does allow some continuity of face-to-face and some continuity which has started, is really a good move. We are very concerned about our young learners. At the same time, we would love to have our middle and high schools continue, or even to think about adding to time. We just, as you saw some of the data from Dr. Wallen, the data doesn't suggest it. And as you're going to hear in a little bit, some of the stresses on our middle and high schools are certainly apparent and is affecting not only health and safety, but it's affecting the quality of education. So with that, Dr. Watson.
Thank you, Dr. Marty. Parkway's mission. Parkway's mission is at the center of our work. The employees of Parkway are here to help students accomplish our mission. As you see, yes, our mission is all about students, and we really want each and every one of our students to be in school every day. The end of our amazing mission says that we want to ensure our students respond to the challenges of an ever-changing world. We are most certainly living in an ever-changing world and helping our students understand how we respond to a global pandemic, addressing safety and wellness and educational opportunities. Next slide. As you heard from Dr. Wallen, we continue to be impacted by COVID-19 in our communities and schools. We recognize that this is having an impact on students and staff alike. It's fair to say that we are all exhausted. We are fatigued by this global pandemic and its effects on our lives. We recognize that schools count, that families count on schools for more than academics. You count on us to provide shelter, nourishment, love, consistency, and so much more. And we were excited to be able to return to in-person learning in October. And at that point, the community spread was here, but our community was healthier. Clearly, the data was not as grim as it is now. We're seeing numbers that many did not think could even occur in our communities. Thus, our educational decisions are truly tied to our ever-changing world. The administration considered many factors prior to the recommendation to the Board of Education. You heard Dr. Wallen and the data she shared. We also studied that data. Right now, Parkway and COVID-19 are in conflict. COVID is impacting our ability to do some of the mission-focused work that we'd like to do on a daily basis. Again, we want nothing more than to have all of our students in our schools every day. Illness and quarantines were areas we reviewed, and you heard the numbers from Dr. Wallen. The data showing illness by age was also important information that we reviewed. We reviewed the county data and the Parkway data. We are part of the greater community, as Dr. Wallen has shared, and we're seeing similar trends here in Parkway. Again, the reality is that we have this conflict, and we did do our due diligence by looking at key pieces of information impacting what we can do and how we can do it, as we are here to provide an education and keep people healthy. Next slide. Thank you. We also considered staffing. Teachers and other staff members continue to get ill, quarantined due to exposure, and the need to tend to their own children and family members who are ill and quarantined. Our building leaders have been putting together a puzzle each day and doing their very best to maintain as much consistency for students as possible. And our certified staff have been so flexible and helpful in helping out others whenever they can. For example, librarians, instructional coaches, and others, they have been pulled from their responsibilities to support a classroom of students because substitutes are not always available. In addition, teachers are taking classes instead of having their plan time on many days. So why are our principals putting together this puzzle every day to cover classrooms? Again, it's due to the lack of substitutes. Our fill rate this month has ranged from 60.5%, which was today, to 79% on November 6th. When looking at each day we've had in-person learning, the majority of our days, we've seen a fill rate in the mid to low 60s, 60%. That means approximately 40% of our classrooms are not covered with the substitutes being requested. With all that's going on, and as of yesterday, we had yet to reach this critical level with covering classes, but we have been close. Based on today's fill rate of 60.5%, our lowest yet, I don't have a pulse on what coverage looked like in our buildings today and how our administrators were able to put those puzzle pieces together. In addition, our building administrators are also getting ill, having to quarantine and take care of their children when they are sent home from school. It also becomes a bit of a scramble when we don't have an administrative team in a building, or we might be missing 3 administrators based on illness and quarantine. Just like the principals do in their building, we do the same. In these situations, everyone has been pitching in. SAT members are covering buildings as well as members of the Teaching, Learning, and Accountability Department. Our current blended model, our current blended learning schedule provides some in-person learning for students, as we all know, and maximizes the opportunity for social distancing. This is especially beneficial for our youngest students, many of whom are not equipped to learn online without adult guidance. However, due to the higher volume of illness, quarantines, and challenges of the blended schedule, we're seeing a significant increase in absenteeism, particularly in high schools. Yesterday, when you received the letter from Dr. Marty, it stated between 20 and 25% of students who chose in-person learning are not coming to school. While some of those absences are due to quarantine, many are due to COVID concerns. Yesterday, when we received the attendance report, which arrives at 4 a.m. the next day, we experienced the lowest attendance rate thus far. Just to give you an example, at Fern Ridge, only 48% of the students who were scheduled to be at school yesterday attended. At South High, only 67.2% of those who were to be in school attended. Now, on a greater scale, keep in mind that about 30% of our students are already attending virtual campus. So our high schools are servicing less than half of the total number of students that they typically would have. I must say it's been quite strange to see 3, 4, 8 students in a high school classroom. And the student lunch shifts are very sparse and eerily quiet. Our middle school's attendance rates have been hovering around the 80%. 4 of our middle schools saw their lowest attendance rates yesterday as well. As we monitor attendance in all of our schools each day, We have seen a decline as the days go by in many of our elementary, middle, and high schools. In comparison, elementary attendance has been better than our secondary schools. One of our most crowded elementary schools had an attendance rate of 94.9% yesterday. That meant 94 students attended school during in-person learning yesterday at Craig Elementary School. Students who are enrolled in in-person learning are just starting to stay home. Many are not coming to school. In addition, as families monitor the community spread, we're receiving many requests for students to switch from in-person learning to virtual campus. And this simply cannot occur right now. Why? If we moved students based on the many requests we have already received, after we've already established our teachers who are teaching in virtual campus and in-person learning, if we made shifts, we would have to collapse in-person sections, move in-person students to different teachers, and open new classes for virtual campus. This would be less than ideal for our students and for our teachers. As families make decisions not to send students to school, and as more and more students are ill or quarantined, it has become apparent that we could do better for our students and teachers in the realm of teaching and learning and safety if we make a shift to our schedule. Again, our teachers are amazing. They are working so hard and giving so much as they are now teaching concurrently. Last week, a parent told me that Parkway teachers are rocking it. And I agree, they are. Secondary teachers are being asked to teach concurrently right now, and this is occurring for the majority of their classes, if not all of them. This is very difficult, and it really is the least effective teaching strategy that we have in our toolbox. It's not only difficult for teachers, but most importantly, it is not optimal for students. Our elementary teachers are also being asked to teach concurrently by engaging our students at home during morning meeting, math, and ELA mini lessons. So Dr. Marty shared. He shared the recommendation with you, again, which was based on looking at many factors, some of which I just highlighted prior to this slide. So what are the benefits? We can move support staff and substitute teachers from our secondary schools to provide support in our 18 elementary schools to hopefully keep them open for in-person learning. I do believe our substitute fill rate will continue to decline. I spoke with a retired teacher who loves subbing in our Parkway schools. She and others are taking a break at this time, and that is what we're seeing quite a bit across the board. If our elementary students continue in the blended model, this significantly helps with social distancing. In addition, our elementary principals have highlighted the amazing work our teachers are able to accomplish with 50% of their students at a time. Teachers are typically able to conference with each student every day now that they have 50%. That typically is not possible when you have 100% of your students in class. Our middle and high school students, we know they have a higher risk for illness, spread of illness, and quarantines that are disrupting their learning. While distance learning is not ideal, we know most of our older students are more equipped to learn online until the health of our community improves. Again, we want all of our students in school. Right now, our mission and COVID-19 are not on the same page, and we have to pay attention to this. Our mission is very clear. We are to ensure that we are making decisions that are in the best interest of all students. In looking at all, we have shared the recommendation for secondary and elementary. Everyone, we're not in this position because we want to be. We're not making recommendations because we'd prefer to be doing that than the things that we know that we can do for kids. We are not in the midst of this global pandemic by choice. Parkway is a large community, and based on the data, we are responding to this ever-changing world by helping to stop the spread of this virus. With everyone doing their part, hopefully, we can return to a more normal schedule sooner than later. We've had conversations regarding students with special needs, and we know that over the past 8 months, our students with the most significant needs have missed many supports and services that they need to thrive. A plan has been developed with the input of special education administrators, building principals, and district leaders to have a tiered approach for supports and services for students that are in person. And at this time, based on this recommendation, this would be elementary if we move forward. The families of elementary students who meet the requirements for this additional support will be notified in the coming week if the Board of Education approves this recommendation. Due to safety, staffing needs, and space, we are unable to return all students with IEPs to 4 days of in-person learning. Due to the health and safety of our older students, middle and high school, their supports will be provided virtually to the greatest extent possible. At this time, we plan to return our students with the most need at the secondary level to in-person learning supports as soon as it is safe to do so. All right, next slide will be Mr. Tandy.
Well, thank you, Chelsea, and greetings, President Todd, members of the board, Dr. Marty, and Ms. Stover. If we could back up one slide, please. There we go, one slide. So what I'm doing is just reiterating the timeline if the recommendation is approved tonight. Obviously, there we are on November 18th. Tonight, we would communicate the outcome of the decision, as well as any revised calendars that might be necessary. After if it's approved, after the Thanksgiving holiday, middle and high schools would transition to the distance learning model, and that would continue for them through the end of the first semester, which ends on Friday, January 15th. We do have some days built in as we come back from the Thanksgiving holiday, and you will see that both before and after both the Thanksgiving holiday and the winter holiday, some days built in for the elementary students to be virtual, again, at the beginning and at the end of those holidays. And we've had some questions, why is that? And it's from a health and safety standpoint. So for example, what we're trying to do is minimize the potential that, for example, you might come to school a day or two before the holiday and get exposed to someone and then have a required quarantine as you're heading into the holiday. Or on the flip side, perhaps you've been on the holiday and perhaps you get exposed, and we're trying to minimize the potential that you might come back to school the first couple of days and expose other people and expand the number of people into quarantine. So that's why those days are built in there. That's why you see those days there. For example, January 5th and 6th, December 3rd, or excuse me, November 30th through the December 2nd. That's why those are in there for K-5. It's from a health and safety standpoint. Next slide, please. So if the recommendation is approved tonight, we have a calendar that's been revised for the elementary K-5 calendar, and that would be communicated tonight or in the morning. And that would show specifically through the end of the semester on each day, whether you're in group 1 or 2, what your child will be doing. And so we'll publish that after the board meeting tonight, depending on what the outcome is. But that will provide parents with a very clear picture of, you know, what each day holds for their child through the end of January 15th in the first semester. So subject to your questions, that's all I have, Dr. Marty.
Thank you, everybody. And I will just conclude and then we'll turn it over to more questions. But at the last couple of meetings, I have mentioned that, you know, we're all concerned about obviously, you know, again, making the right kind of decision, but we know also that we heard again tonight and we're getting communications. There's a lot of people who have strong feelings on all kinds of sides of this issue. And as I've said in the past, I believe I really do believe we can address both health and safety. And I hope that you saw through the presentation here, that that's our effort to address both health and safety, but we're also have to do that with a quality teaching and learning experience. I think we can do both. I don't think it's either or. I think by keeping our high school and middle school kids in virtual or going back to virtual, we're certainly addressing health and safety. And I think we're improving, as Dr. Watson pointed out, our instruction and obviously our continuity and day-to-day work in a way that I think is very similar to our first quarter, which now we look at as being pretty successful in many respects. Certainly not for everyone, but for a lot of students and for staff. At the elementary, we believe very strongly that our younger students need some face-to-face. And given, as Dr. Watson has said, with smaller numbers and people practicing, and our students and staff have been very good about the protocols, we believe we can maintain health and safety and also take care of teaching and learning at that elementary level with some face-to-face. So we believe we can do both. It's a challenge, but we believe getting through this semester is really important for us in both quality teaching and learning, and certainly doing our share to keep everybody healthy and safe. So thank you, and we'll turn it over to you, Mr. Todd, and the board to have some discussion with us.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you who contributed this evening in preparing the recommendation over the last however long you've been preparing. We just saw it as the community saw it yesterday. So we're dissecting it during the last 24 hours, and we appreciate the additional information tonight. I'll start off with a question around mental health, and I'll just make a couple of comments and ask a question or two. You know, Dr. Marty, you said, you know, you referenced first quarter being pretty successful. We did hear a lot of talk, a lot of communication from both parents and students about mental health, about the health of our students mentally. And at the last two board meetings, I asked if we could survey students around mental health. I don't think that's happened yet. I'm not sure why, but I think that I think we need to focus. If this recommendation gets approved, I think we really need to step up our efforts to support kids. I know Greg's office has been working on that, but I haven't seen evidence of that, and I'd like, if there's things going on that we're not aware of, it would be great to hear it. If there's things that that are in place that kids aren't taking advantage of, we need to hear about that. We need to know why they're not, and what can be done to get those services and those supports to kids. But you know, our high school students, it really doesn't matter. Our high school, middle school, either one, I mean, they're both at risk for mental health problems and challenges. And I think putting them in a situation where they've only been back in school for a week or two, and now another week or two from now, we're going to pull the plug and we're going to send them back to all virtual. I'm concerned about their mental health. So,
well, Mr. Todd, you and the other board members have been champions of mental health needs even before the COVID. So we appreciate that. I'm going to let Greg Matheson respond. I think he's already spoken to the board a little bit, but he can give an update. And to your request, Mr. Todd, yes, I do think we do need to be more aggressive to get information from students, and Dr. Matheson and I and others will certainly go to work on that. But Greg, can you just perhaps give an update on some of the concerns raised?
I can, but I think Dr. Watson might have some information about the needs assessment.
Yeah, I've got it pulled up, if that helps, and it'll save you from talking as much. Our high schools did give a needs assessment to our high school students at the early on in the quarter, first quarter. And we were talking about doing the second one after this board meeting, or after the board meeting where you mentioned it, Mr. Todd. At that point, then our students came back and we put a pause on sending out a second needs assessment because we really wanted to check on kids in person. But I will share with you some of the questions that are on the needs assessment, which our counselors then reviewed and reached out to kids and families based on how our students responded. So it wasn't anonymous because our counselors and our administrators needed to know who the individuals were. One of the questions, my family and I have all of our needs met, and they can respond. My family and I have enough food. There's a question about internet and devices. Do you have what you need? Wanted to know how, are kids working? So that would tell us about some supports we need to give kids. I work more than 20 hours per week. I have a job that takes place during summer, all of our virtual school day, because that is what we were finding as families are going through various circumstances. Some of our students needed to go to work to help support the family. There were some open-ended questions about physical needs that they have, academic needs that they have, asking about confidence level in regards to their learning, asking if they needed help outside of class for some of their subjects. I'm just looking through them instead of reading them all. Virtual learning is difficult for me because an open-ended question about social emotional needs, a question about using coping strategies and how kids are feeling about those coping strategies, asking if kids are feeling a lot of anxiety right now. So I feel a lot of anxiety right now, yes or no. I feel depressed right now, yes or no. I feel high degrees of stress right now and I would like to talk to someone about it, yes or no. I would like to talk to someone about how I'm feeling in the next few days. I would like to talk with someone about some different coping strategies. And then there were some questions for seniors only as our teams were wanting to help and get ready to help kids with financial aid, application process, A+, and a number of other things. So that kind of runs through the survey that was sent out. And again, early on, and we were looking at this to see what we wanted to do again or send the same one again when we returned in person. And the decision was, let's talk to these kids if we can from a distance, not face to face, but in the same space versus sending out a survey. So that's where we are at this time.
So you said that was not anonymous, right?
Correct. It was not anonymous.
So did we get 100% participation in that, or what kind of percentage did we get? My guess is that since it was not anonymous, there were probably a group of students who didn't feel comfortable responding, and so I'm concerned about the group that didn't respond, as much as I'm concerned about ones that did and are dealing with some issues.
You were right. I'm sure it was not 100%. Even when it's anonymous, we have kids who don't fill it out. So I don't know what the return rate is. I can certainly ask our building principals to find out, and I can follow up with you in regards to the return rate of these surveys. I think the other piece is, our administrators know many of our kids. Granted, if our high school kids and they're freshmen, our high school principals and counselors may not know those kiddos, but they have been checking in on kids and families that they're aware of, in addition to being aware from the middle school, knowing information about freshmen. They have a problem-solving process. They also, all of our schools have a process on how to check in on kids if they're not attending school and what that looks like. We established those systems very intentionally in the spring, and those have just continued and even gotten better.
To be it's a tricky, but
Okay.
it would be concerning if it was anonymous, because if you have somebody report something really seriously concerning, you want to be able to find those, to reach out to those kids. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Dr. Watson, can I follow up with another question? To me, as we sort of evaluate what we're doing, there's a couple of layers to our decision making. The first level of this is, obviously the motivation and desire. We've heard from a lot of parents, and a lot of us want kids back in buildings. But when you were giving your presentation, the second level of that is it safe to go back in buildings? And that's a question, but different people might answer it differently. But then, the overarching, determinant is, can we even do it? And when you were giving your presentation, you were talking about fill rates and substitutes and teacher absences. And it seems to me, if we're in a position where we don't even have enough teachers to be in classrooms, that like the first two issues I just mentioned don't even really matter. Can you talk to us about what does it look like, building by building, classroom by classroom, as we, and forgive me, I'm not sure I'm versed enough in the term fill rate to know exactly what it means, but talk to us about what that looks like, what that means, as we're not able to have the numbers we'd like.
So when we have teachers who are going to be out, we have a process that teachers submit that information, right? And it's a nice computer system, and it goes to Kelly Subs. And so when I talked about the fill rate, out of, if we want 100% of our positions covered, our fill rate would be 100%. So what we're saying is, based on the teachers who requested a sub, we only had subs for 60% of those individuals. So that means that there were buildings that had classrooms that did not have substitute teachers. Typically in a normal year, our fill rate is around, I sent Mike a text earlier, 96%. And that's what it has been for the past number of years. So really good. But because of the lack of subs, our principals look at the master schedule. They look at who's absent and who's off during certain times of the day, and they try to fill in those pieces. And this teacher might cover this class, and another teacher might cover another class. We also have our full-time substitutes. They are full-time, substitutes. They are covering classes. Even with our full-time substitutes in the building, we are still lacking substitutes to cover classes.
So what happened?
What it looks like in every building, it depends on the schedule, and it depends on the resources that the principal has.
So, I mean, are there classes without teachers? Is it teachers having to cover class, giving up planning periods, things like that?
Yes, we have teachers giving up planning periods to cover classes. Yes, and so their plan period is a certain time, and we've been able to, fill in other parts of the day by possibly other teachers during their plan time. One of the things that we don't want to do is, mix kids if we don't have to, especially in our elementary, because we've done a really good job of keeping those cohorts together. But in a situation when there's nobody else, if we have a class of 8 kids and no teacher, we have to combine those classes because we have to have kids with a certified person.
So we're having, even though it's in person, it's not really education the way we want it to be, right? I mean, we're exposing kids to other, teachers, and I'm sort of thinking out loud as you say it, but to me, this is the most persuasive.
There are situations like that, yes. It's not every day, everywhere, but with the lack of the subs, and because our staff needs to be home, quarantined, getting healthy, taking care of their own kids and families, we're doing the very best we can with the resources that we have. And again, I want to a great thank you to all of the teachers out there for all their hard work that they're doing and how they are supporting each other in the buildings. We've got teachers who are home, they're quarantined, some are ill, and you will walk into a classroom and you will see that teacher's face on the smart board, and they are teaching the kids that are in the classroom while they are at home. And we also have other kids tuning in who are at home, quarantined, listening to the teacher at home as well. And we have to have a certified person in that classroom at all times, even though that person might not be teaching, because the teacher's on the smart board teaching all the kids sitting in the classroom and sitting at home. We still have to have coverage for that classroom. We have to have a certified person in the room with kids to support them and to make sure, they're safe.
Oh, will this improve tremendously to get substitutes or have a certified teacher in a classroom if the middle schools and high schools go virtual, and therefore there will not be a need for substitutes? So is that going to clarify the problem for the elementary level?
We certainly hope so. That's what we're planning on, is that we won't be pulled at all three levels. We'll only be covering for the most part for elementary. Yes. Will we have to have subs for secondary? Yes, there are times that we will. We'll have employees that are ill who can't teach from home, and we'll have to take care of kids that way.
Mhm.
But absolutely, we won't have resources with substitutes going to our 10 secondary schools. We'll devote them all to our elementary.
So how are they going to go to the elementary schools if they're teaching virtually at the high school? So how do we take them from a high school virtual classroom to an elementary to substitute? Am I thinking correctly here?
Maybe, so I'm referring to the Kelly subs, the substitutes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
those substitutes won't be spread between three levels. We'll only need them for elementary. And so that should really help us with our fill rate in our
Yeah.
elementary schools.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Dr. Sorrentino, I do think though that there is, we need some extra supports with our health services. There's also supports that we may need administratively for people that are on quarantine or isolation in those areas. And we would be able to possibly utilize those folks at the elementary level to help fill in, and also our nurses with contact tracing, which is a lot of effort and work. Being able to have school nurses and nurse TAs be able to help out more with that. And would have less contact tracing as well, due to the fact that those students would be in a virtual distance learning space.
And Dr. Wallen, we have, correct me if I'm wrong, we've had buildings without nurse coverage this school year.
Yes.
Because, go ahead.
I had 2 vacancies every day for the past week and a half that weren't filled. So we have nurses that are sick too.
Sure.
I know there was a question about testing, and I know that the district has considered what it would look like to do testing, and I got a really good response as to why we're choosing not to go that route. And I think it could be helpful to share that. I thought it made a whole ton of sense.
Sure. Yes, so the federal government has sent some rapid test kits to states with the idea that they would be distributed to schools and those kits would be administered at schools. And when I learned about that program in Missouri, I just had several concerns. One of the biggest concerns was just our capacity to do testing in the school. We are totally overwhelmed right now with contact tracing and just doing the normal school health services that we do, and doing a COVID test in a school setting requires special PPE and requires a lot of time. And I was very worried that this would be pulling our school nurses to do this activity and not be able to do all the other things that they're being asked to do. I was also concerned that one of the requirements of the test, of this particular test, is that it be done when someone is symptomatic. So we would be encouraging, or at least facilitating, people coming to school sick in order to get a COVID test. And we're really working very hard to discourage sick individuals from coming into the buildings. So if the test should only be given after somebody had been symptomatic for several days, it felt like that the school setting was not the appropriate place to be doing that testing. I was concerned about the health and safety of our nurses. I didn't want to put them in extra risk with, being in contact with individuals who may have COVID in that kind of intimate way. I was also concerned that it would force nurses to practice outside their scope because they would be becoming the diagnostician for the individuals that were seeking testing. And the symptoms of COVID can also be symptoms of many other illnesses. And just doing a rapid COVID test doesn't rule out strep throat or flu or some of the other conditions that could be masquerading with similar symptoms. So all of those, I ran it through our health department. They felt that the rapid tests were not the appropriate tests to be doing because there's a very high false negative rate. So if you get a negative test and you have symptoms, you have to go get a PCR test anyway to rule out COVID. So they're feeling, and they don't even do any rapid testing, is that the PCR test is the gold standard for testing. So I ran it through our physician consultant. He also felt like that was very inappropriate to be doing in the school setting. They don't even do it in their practice. They send people to special sites where they have, outdoor testing and full PPE. So, there were just numerous concerns, and we made the decision not to participate.
It was a sound call, so.
Well, and one other thing is we really have adequate testing in our community. So there are just scores of places where people can get COVID tests. So that was the other thing, that it's not that we're in a rural area where there's no testing. So.
I'm not sure who this question is for, and I don't know if this is something that can be tied into our vote tonight, but we've all received a lot of emails over the last few days, some nicer than others. And we're obviously not going to make everyone happy, but one of the recurring themes that I've seen is that parents, teachers, everyone would like some consistency, something they can depend on. Is it possible if we make this decision tonight to say, in the past when we've sort of come up with plans, we're going to do this through this date, and then we've amended it based on different things. But I do think it would be helpful for our teachers and students to know that this is in effect through January. We have a vaccine tomorrow, whatever it is, that we are going to be locked into something so that teachers and parents can plan accordingly. Is that doable, Dr. Marty, Dr. Watson? I'm not sure who that is directed to, but is that something we can do? Dr. Marty, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Seltzer. To your point, in fact, the principals, that was a really a strong message from our principals as we were talking to them, because that's what they want for their families, and that's what they want for their teachers. So yes, I think we, one of the things in looking back in the first quarter, one of the things that we said going into the first quarter, and when we made the initial plans in summer, we wanted to offer consistency, predictability, continuity. And that's what that first quarter did, even though now looking back on it, that's what it was. But, at the time we wanted people back in school. But yes, we think this will give our secondary teachers and students now the assurance, because as we've talked about, classrooms every day, especially at that high school level, the content and delivery and assessments are so key every day. And when you have disruptions and we don't have students coming to school, it's disruptive. So yes, but middle school, elementary, the same thing for teachers to plan effectively. Yes. Thank you for really reinforcing that. We do want to assure everyone that if the board approves this, that they'll have consistency through the first semester. Now we'll have to start thinking about second semester soon. Probably right after Thanksgiving, we're going to have to really start thinking about second semester, and we've already talked a bit about it. But right now, this will be our plan through the first semester, no matter what would happen. We would stay with us. Now, elementary schools, we would try to keep the blended. If we, ran into difficulties, we may have to close a school. We may not have to close the whole elementary program, but we might have to close schools down for a while if we have situations of major breakouts or quarantine or lack of adults to cover. but we want to keep school kids in school K-5 if at all possible in a blended model.
It's what, the 18th of the month. If we're at such a critical stage, why are we waiting till the 30th to make this change?
Well, so the rest of this week would be our blended model for, continuing. Monday and Tuesday of next week is virtual days for everybody. And then the 30th coming back was a virtual Monday. And then as Paul showed in his timeline, we would, the 1st and 2nd of December, to extend our Thanksgiving concern, would be virtual days. So literally this decision is almost immediate. It covers starting really immediately, but in the way we had planned November anyway, next week are virtual days, and so is the 30th.
So why can't we just say that this is officially virtual from this point on?
Well, I think, again, it's that continuity Kevin Seltzer was talking about. I think our staff is prepared to get through this week. And I think, families have planned too. We want to give them.
No, but I was talking about going into next week or right after Thanksgiving, just say this is virtual from that point on for the middle schools and high schools.
It would be. That's what we're recommending. Yeah,
Okay.
We're recommending, yes, right. And the blended
Friday. Sorry, I was good. Friday would be the last day of in-person learning.
This Friday.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, that takes care of it then.
And so we wouldn't have to have more board meetings till January?
I think we have a meeting on December 9th.
So one of the things that we have heard over and over is from students talking about how they didn't, students that were regularly 4.0 students, last year with this first quarter, there were all sorts of reports of students with Fs and just terrible grades. And there was a lot of blame, thrown around different places. Are we tracking that presumed decrease in performance, and can we attribute it to anything specifically, and what are we doing to improve that for the second quarter?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because we haven't heard from Kevin Beckner, and Kevin has given us some data that was actually more encouraging than we had anticipated in terms of Fs. And so Kevin, you want to give a quick synopsis? I don't know how prepared you are to give exact data, but.
Sure. So what we did was really watch where we were at the end of first semester last year, and then how the grades of students, particularly in our high school, compared then to first quarter of this year, knowing that we're in a quarter system rather than a semester system. We were concerned, particularly early on in first quarter, as we were watching those grades live. By the end of the quarter, what we actually saw is that in last school year, about 96.4% of our students had passing grades. While we did see that decline, it declined to 93%. So when we were initially looking at a much higher rate of students not passing classes by the end of first quarter, we did see that number decrease dramatically, which is not abnormal for any given school year. Our midterm grades are much lower than our final grades, though certainly we do have a number of students who did increase, or a number of grades, I should say, that were increased failure rates. Typically, we actually have about 1 in 5 students who have one failing grade during the school year, and that number only increased by about 2% this year. So what we're seeing is that some students who are struggling even more, meaning that they might have more than one F, but it is not a substantially huge number that is concerning. That's a tribute to really a lot of the work our teachers did towards the end of first quarter to try to catch students up, to try to make sure that they understood the material. If you recall, during first quarter, we had much shorter classes, much less instructional time, and part of the decision to return students to in-person was to lengthen first quarter by a week. And I know many students and teachers took advantage of that to really work on students who might have been behind on completing work or behind on understanding the material, and they really took that extra time to make sure that students were able to catch up. So while we did see a slight increase, or I should say a slight decrease in our number, our percentage of grades that were passing grades, it was not as alarming as it was maybe when we talked 2 months ago.
Okay. Good.
I'd like to ask a question, if I may. This is in respect to our struggling learners. And if I understand it correctly, students with special needs will receive in-person support only if they're at the elementary level. Is that correct? And what are we going to do for our struggling learners at the middle school and high school level? I understand that we're being told that it will continue virtual, but as we all have agreed, some students don't thrive virtually. And now we're pushing the virtual for middle school and high school into the end of Q2, where students are going to be doing final exams, studying for finals. They're going to have AP exams probably in some courses. Where are they going to get help? If they're not able to do this successfully virtually, what can we do? It just would seem that there ought to be some level of in-person intervention support for our middle school and high schoolers that really, really need that, even if it's just one-on-one with a teacher once a week. I mean, why can we not do something like that? You know, I understand trying to abide by the health and safety precautions, but surely there ought to be something that we could do to help here.
So Debbie, are you speaking specifically around, I can speak around the students with special needs portion of that, but I think your question kind of expanded out to
It
any
did, yeah.
who's struggling. You know, this is the honest truth. The hard part is that this is a push and a pull. I mean, there's conflicting pieces here. You know, we know that from the data that we just saw, that those age groups and those students, the populations for COVID are pretty high. And we're making the decision, or we're recommending, I guess is the question, is the point, we're recommending that middle schools and high schools per that data are staying virtual. My team did take a look deeply at how could we, if possible, bring certain groups of students in at the middle school and high school level, working with the director of special school district, Bobby Fleming, her special ed administrables, and some teachers. And you know, one of the hard parts is when we're looking at that plan is how many students could we be able to effectively help and work with, on top of what risks are we now increasing with potential COVID related illnesses. And that's tough. And how do we say to some groups of populations of students that your students are going virtual, middle school and high school, on top of and saying, well, there are going to be small groups of students that could come in. So we wrestled with that, and we've been wrestling with that for a while, and it's been a difficult decision, difficult conversation. Our staff members that work for our Parkway kids that are special school district employees also are also worried about the high impact of COVID and the COVID numbers in those age groups. And that also weighs on some of those conversations that we've had. But to go to your question about what interventions, we have a lot of different interventions that we utilize during first quarter. I've challenged Dr. Fleming and our special educators, as well as our general educators, on what are we doing for kids that are falling through the cracks and that are in virtual. And a lot of the different things from our case managers looking at their individual needs. It's difficult to talk about individual students in a broad sense like this, but I do know that as we went into first quarter, the beginning was tough and pretty rough, but as we got into the middle and end of first quarter, we did start to find our niche on how we can meet the needs of our students and with our parents as well. We also, I know at the high school level, I believe we have increased intervention time during those periods, and some of that time can be also utilized working one-on-one with teachers in that virtual space. But yes, this issue, Ms. Hopper, is very difficult by making virtual or making that recommendation, that there will be some students who won't be able to access their PT or OT, some students that have some specific needs at this point in this juncture. One of the points that Chelsea said in there is, as soon as it's safe and possible, we need to look at bringing some of those groups of students back earlier potentially than we would possibly the whole population. But right now, the data and the numbers are indicating that in the secondary area and secondary level, it just does not seem safe to do so. And that's a difficult thing to put out, but that is the feeling that we have.
Well, even in the virtual classrooms where students have learning needs, are teachers differentiating the curriculum, the program for them?
Yes, they're differentiating that. They're in some cases able to materials to the families, whether that's manipulatives or other items that could be helpful, utilizing other technologies to be able to try to help meet their needs. And we're talking about maybe students who are deaf, hard of hearing, trying to use closed captioning, trying to use interpreters. I know that's not perfect, but trying to find other ways that we can meet their individual needs too. So yes, definitely differentiating, definitely trying to meet their individual needs. Teachers in the gen ed population, as well as our special educators, are working extremely hard to meet those needs. And I know that they will do the same as we move forward.
Are special ed teachers doing any FaceTime directly with their students to work on lessons and needs and questions and?
Yeah, so some small group work. I mean, if we're talking about groups of 2, groups of 3, sometimes possibly one-on-one, but it all depends on what their IEP is and what the needs are of that individual student. But yes, we're able to do that.
Great, thanks.
And so as the middle school and high schoolers move to virtual now, what schedule are they going to be following?
They're going to be following largely the same schedule that they have right now. We are going to be making some adjustments to learning support to make that function more like office hours did during first quarter, where students aren't required to begin attending at 7:30, but rather at 8:40. I did have the opportunity and was really grateful. Like Dr. Marty said, we certainly practice safe distancing when we do, but we do try to visit our schools and talk to our teachers. Today, I had the opportunity to walk around one of our high schools and talk to about a half dozen teachers. And one of the things we heard, that I heard today in those conversations, was teachers feeling much more positive about having more instructional time with students, having the longer class periods. If you recall, we had 55-minute class periods during first quarter in distance learning. We've increased those to 110 minutes during this quarter, with about 70 of those being for academic learning, another 20 being for learning support, and then 10 for in-person students being things that we have to do now, like schedule restroom breaks and increase hand washing and do the things we have to do as a result of COVID. But we've just heard that increased instructional time is really benefiting students. That time that they have in the classroom for that learning support time that we've built into each of the periods is really beneficial. So we certainly know high school students love to sleep in and really did enjoy that 10 a.m. start time. But we know for the good of their learning, we really need to make sure that we have the instructional minutes that really will be useful to teachers to ensure that they continue learning and learning to the degree that they need to. So we'll continue using the same bell schedule that students in the high school are on currently.
And what in middle school, the same as what they're?
Middle school, the same. Yep. We are making one slight adjustment just because we got feedback that 5 minutes between classes was not sufficient for our middle schoolers. So we are going to be increasing that just slightly, but really it's the same start time, same end time, essentially the same schedule they're following now.
Okay. And will parents and students be getting, I assume you'll send out communication as to what all that will entail, like you've done in the past.
certainly I know Paul's team has been working hard on that to make sure that we've got all the visuals ready and so that everybody knows exactly what to expect and where they need to be when.
I do
How
have a
is it-
question. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm just curious from Dr. Wallen, how well are our families submitting their daily screeners? I know that there wasn't some tracking really taking place on there, but I'm just curious as to if there is some, are we only getting 10% of families sending it in? Are we getting 90% of families sending them in? And would that help at all? And then I have a follow-up question after that.
Certainly, some families are doing it, but not all families. I don't even think all staff are necessarily doing it, although we're asking all staff to, and we're asking all families to. I think, the message that people should stay home when they're sick is out there, but that we still are seeing individuals come to school who shouldn't be there, either because they are a known exposure to somebody who's positive, or perhaps they're sick themselves. So I'm not sure whether the tool would make a difference in that or not. I don't know if that completely answers your question.
No, I was just curious as to, yeah. And then can you just clarify for the purposes for our community, when they come to school, if somebody's awaiting a COVID test, should they come to school or not? And then the follow-up question also is, when someone is quarantined and they decide to get a rapid test and it comes up negative, what does that mean?
Sure. So the first question is, if you're awaiting a test, if you can come to school. It depends, I guess, on the reason you're awaiting a test. If you're waiting a test because you're a known contact to somebody, a close contact to somebody who's positive, or because you have symptoms yourself, you shouldn't come to school. If you're awaiting a test just because you're curious, then that doesn't matter. But if it's because you are a known contact of a person who has COVID, or are symptomatic yourself, then you shouldn't come to work or school. And then unfortunately, a negative test does not shorten a quarantine. So if you've been a close contact with somebody who is positive for COVID, the quarantine period is 14 days. And the reason it's 14 days is because the incubation period for the virus is 2 to 14 days. And so you could have a negative test at day 7 and still become positive at day 10, for example. So having that negative test does not shorten your quarantine, unfortunately, nor does it shorten your isolation period. The isolation period for if you have COVID, is 10 days. And then you need to be fever-free and your symptoms improve before you come back to school at the end of that 10-day period. And a negative test anywhere in that 10-day period doesn't shorten your isolation either. And those are just public health guidelines.
Okay. Thank you.
I was just going to ask, and this might be a question for Dr. Watson. Our elementary teachers are now supporting kids on asynchronous days. How's that going? And are you getting any feedback from that?
It's hard. It's hard. We're asking our teachers to do something that is not easy, that is, like I said earlier, it's hard, and because their camera's on. Even on those asynchronous days, teachers have their cameras on because we have kids who are quarantined, and our teachers want to support students, and they're working very diligently and doing their best, but it's not easy. It's not. I don't want to sugarcoat it because we've got teachers out there struggling, but doing the best they can. They're learning new strategies and how to do things, and how to position themselves. And you've got your kids in the classroom, but you also want to look at the kids on the screen. Our teachers are so intentional with everything that they do. And so many of our teachers are perfectionists, and this is not the way to teach. This is what we're taught in school, right? On how to teach kids.
The other thing I would add that is more challenging in elementary than the secondary level is we know a lot of those students, and Dr. Watson mentioned this in her report, when the teacher's attention is divided, it means that that teacher can't give the full attention to those elementary students who are learning from home. And particularly with our youngest students, kindergarten, first, second grade, even when they were fully in distance learning or fully in person, we know that then those students have their teacher's full attention. And then they're logging in from home and they might not have, an adult's full guidance. And that's just most challenging at our elementary level. It's challenging at all of our levels. We shouldn't try to pretend that it's easy for our middle or high school teachers to teach in both settings. But just to add to what Dr. Watson was saying, just the challenge at elementary school is that much more, that it's just difficult when you're dealing with maybe a 6-year-old who certainly cannot self-manage. It's just that much harder.
I have a couple thoughts and then a clarification on how we're approaching this in terms of, for me in this vote, I look at it, number one, the needs of students and families. Number two, the needs of teachers and staff. And then 3, what are the COVID numbers? And going in reverse order, COVID numbers do not look good and they're not getting better. There's not even a slight drop right now. We're still in a steep rise. The needs of teachers and staff, we've kind of heard already about issues around just the stress they're put under, the extra demands our staff is taking on, and just operationally the issues with our substitutes. It's going to get to the point where we can't fully staff our schools if things don't change. And then for the students, I've been very surprised by the drop off in in-person kids coming to school. And with my daughter today, she had one class today, she should have had 15 kids in. There were 5 kids. So we're seeing both students and families think it's better to be home. And it's tough right now. And just for a point of clarification, as we look at this decision, is the way I look at it, and I could be wrong, a vote tonight to move both middle school and high school back to virtual is only the removal of 9 days in person back to virtual. With all the holidays and the way the calendar works, I'm only counting 9 days that we're going to switch from in person to virtual to finish the quarter out. Is that correct? Am I looking at the dates right?
You probably are, Matt. There's, December has, 3 weeks, and then the 2 days in winter break, we were going to be virtual, and then there's a week and a half before we have finals. So I think that's probably accurate. Kevin Beckner probably could tell us for sure.
Hate to put Kevin on the spot.
I trust, I had to get to my mute button. I do trust that is close to accurate, just given that we're on the every other day schedule. I have not counted myself either.
I will just say, Matt, since you brought it up, again, I just can't emphasize enough. I think we will have at 6/12 predictability, assurance, and continuity. I'm going to use those 3 terms, in those weeks till mid-January. And I think that's so important, particularly truly at our high school where content and course earning credits and is so important, which we've talked about already. Middle school as well. Elementary, again, I think it's a little bit more important for us to see these kids a little bit more. We just, Kevin this week has really been advocating, literacy. To me, the first quarter, I was concerned about K-5, but a lot of the beginning of the year is a lot of relationship building. I think we could achieve that. I believe we could achieve that virtually. We're now getting into a time where some of the real literacy and numeracy and some real skills are becoming really important. And I will tell you on a call today with the superintendents, the state commissioner, Margie Van Even was on, and I think she said it very well. I mean, we really have got to be concerned about what this is doing, particularly to our youngest learners in terms of potential growth of achievement gaps and really some opportunities being missed. So I know there's concerns among our families and our teachers about elementary, but boy, I just hope we could continue to blend it because of that needed face-to-face time. And as Chelsea and Kevin and others have said, our teachers are doing some